Samus Aran, an intergalactic bounty hunter, a super athlete raised by Chozo, and a gun for hire by the Galactic Federation. Not much more could be said about her character, cause she doesn't talk much. That is, not until Metroid Fusion, where she started to speak her mind. Welcome one and all to Vivi's Doodled World. Yes, I play games, but I also doodle, as you can see. Metroid Fusion was the first game to come out after Super Metroid on the SNES. It only took them 8 years, so maybe it's worth the wait. Prior to this, there were 3 Metroid games. Fans were used to Samus being silent and the exploration being freeform. It was up to the player to flesh out the narrative. Well, Fusion stole that formula, changing both the flow of the game and the design of its main character. As I understand it, the fans weren't happy. Yet as far as they're concerned, it might as well have been Metroid Christmas. The very next day Fusion was released, they get another Metroid game. Metroid Prime on the GameCube also tried out new ideas, being the first 3D first-person Metroid game. If you wanted little plot to interrupt your play, this was for you. And these two games seem to be linked somehow, even in the present day. With the recent release of Metroid Prime Remastered, Fusion also became available to play on the Switch shortly after. Time has passed and Metroid continued on, and along with it came a change in opinion. Metroid Fusion, as it turns out, can compete for the top spot within the hearts of Metroid fans. It's highly subjective, I know, which is why I'm not gonna argue its spot in the series. Rather, I'm here to answer a different set of questions. Were the criticisms for Fusion well placed back then? And while few would claim Metroid Fusion is a bad game, is it a bad entry in the series? Well, I'm in a good position to give you answers because Fusion was my first Metroid game. I've experienced it with thumbs unclouded by hate. Since then, I've played Metroid Prime Hunters and Samus Returns. I've also played some of Super Metroid just to see what's up and make a more direct comparison, so let's get started. And right off the bat, we're greeted by a familiar tune and feeling. This very same theme is present in Super Metroid. How is it that it only takes 4 tones to make you feel a sense of loneliness and dread in empty space? Hold on to that feeling because it'll only build as we go along. At the start of the game, Samus gives us a timeline of events leading up to the present. She revisits planet SR388 from the second game. The Metroids have been eradicated, but something even deadlier has taken their place. She kills a frog, and out comes a blob that infects her. Soon after, the infection causes her to lose consciousness, and her ship drifts into an asteroid belt. She's rescued but had to undergo life-altering surgery. Parts of her armor, once that could be removed, were discarded, and she was administered an experimental Metroid vaccine to fight off the parasite. Already we see a major change. Samus no longer dons her heavy orange armor, and her big shoulder pads gone with it. She retains her helmet and blaster, but not much else. She's now in an organic-looking bodysuit accentuated with blue and yellow. The design change was out of desire from the creators to give Samus a fresh, new look. And as opinions are free, some fans liked it and some fans didn't. Personally, I think it's alright. But what I do appreciate is that there's an in-universe explanation for the makeover. As I said, taking off the armor was necessary to save Samus's life. It is also a convenient reason to remove all of Samus's upgrades from the previous game. The Biologic Space Laboratory, they're the ones that hired Samus as an escort, sends us an SOS due to an unknown explosion inside the space station. We're briefed on the situation by a talking computer installed in Samus's new ship. It tells us exactly where to go, the quarantine bay. And finally, we get to control Samus. Metroid Fusion is a 2D platformer shooter, and the movement controls are simple enough. Move left and right with the D-pad, and Samus can crouch by pressing down. The A button is our jump, and there are 2 types. The first is a rigid jump, executed by just pressing A without a direction. If you're holding down left or right, you'll do a somersaulting jump. And both have their uses. Rigid jumps has less horizontal mobility, but somersaulting continuously moves Samus forward, so it can be a bit harder to control. Shooting mid-air also unfurls Samus from somersaults, stopping her horizontal and vertical motion. It's mostly the same as in Super Metroid. It all takes some getting used to, but at the end it feels great and snappy. We visit our first navigation room for another briefing from the ship's computer. And this is kinda pointless because it just repeats our objective. But we can't skip it. The path forward is blocked by a big door unless we initiate the briefing. And be prepared to see this door quite a lot. We go further in and there's still no humans around. Something bad happened here. Check out the music and the dim lighting effect on our way to our objective. The quarantine bay is in shambles. All that's inside is this frog-like creature from earlier. Shoot it with the beam cannon by pressing B. And like earlier, a blob comes out of it, but this time it doesn't try to infect Samus. We'll find out why shortly. Return to the navigation room and we're given a new mission. Investigate more biosigns at the marked location on the map. We get to shoot a few enemies that seem to be blue zombies or something. Then we come to another unskippable nav room briefing. This time though, we're given a new objective. Go to the data room first to get an upgrade. And the data room is conveniently marked on our map. On our way there, we ride an elevator where we get our very first mid-game monologue from Samus. To my knowledge, she has never done this before in any previous game, so it's uncharacteristic, but it does allow the game to flesh out the narrative a bit more. Plus, we get a deeper look at Samus's personality overall. Go to the data room to get a staple upgrade in the series, the ability to shoot missiles. A nice change from Super Metroid is that we don't have to press a button to switch weapons. Instead, we simply have to hold the R button. This will switch our firing mode to missiles, and letting go of the R button reverts back to the arm cannon. Missiles are much more powerful than our beam cannon. However, the projectile moves slower and our ammo is limited. At the start of the game, we have just 10. There are two ways to refill our ammo. One is by visiting a recharge room marked R on the map. These rooms also refill our health. But we can also restore ammo and health on the go by absorbing those blobs. They're called the X parasite or just X. The letter X is a wild card, a variable, something that represents something unknown. I apologize if I bring up memories of algebra class. Likewise, these traits are present in X parasites. I liken them to the Pokemon Ditto. They're gelatinous in their purest form but are masters of mimicry, taking on the various forms of the enemies we encounter. They're the main antagonist in this game. These are the parasites that almost ended Samus's life, but due to what happened, they are now a boon to Samus. Metroids are the natural predators of X. Thus, the Metroid vaccine that saved Samus's life has changed her genetic makeup. She is now immune to X, and gunning down their mimic form reverts them to their gelatinous state, which Samus can then absorb. Yellow X restores health, while Green X refills missile ammo. Something happened to the station's power, so the elevator's down. We now have to find another exit. Immediately, our missiles come in handy. Shoot this covering and we can enter the vents, revealing an unmapped area. And the game certainly wastes no time in trying to teach you how to move around its complex geometry. First is this alien thing that blocks your path. Beams just bounce off them, so we use our missiles. Next, standing on the cracked floor makes it crumble, and the tiles that regenerate in their place become impassable, meaning it's a one-way trip. And finally, there's this cracked wall. Shoot it with the beam to open a path. And all that happens in less than a minute. In other games, we could consider these secrets, but not so in Metroid, as this is the only path to our story objective. If you haven't played Metroid before, you'll realize that your weapons are not only to dispose of enemies, but are actually tools for exploration. It doesn't take long before we get our first collectible. This one increases our missile capacity by 5, and knowing which rooms have a collectible is simple. They're displayed as circles on the map, and when collected, they turn into dots. We even get a chance to find a hidden collectible. The room right next to the first missile pickup has another collectible according to the map. We reveal it by shooting this part of the wall, so we already have the feeling that there are plenty of secrets in this game. Right before the first boss fight, we get our first health upgrade, which comes in the form of energy tanks. Each one gives us an extra 100 hit points, meaning this first one effectively doubles our health. Arrive at the objective and we get our first boss. It's an advanced X-Parasite that takes the form of a formidable Metroid. It's a rather simple fight, all its attacks can be dodged by simply jumping. Most enemies also don't have recovery frames, so we can dispatch this boss pretty quickly by just going ham with our arm cannon and missiles. Once defeated, it turns into Core X, which makes a final-ditch effort to kill us with the most primitive of strategies. It just comes after us and does contact damage. This time though, we can only harm it with missiles. If we run low on ammo, we can shoot it with the beam cannon to make smaller X splinter off. It goes down in just 3 missiles, but this one does have recovery frames, so we can't just go ham. Defeat it and absorb the X from inside. And this is one way Samus regains her latent abilities in this game. What's more, what we get is actually based on the boss. This one could roll up into a ball, thus we get the Morph Ball ability. On our way out, we start to see multiple mechanics integrated into a puzzle. We have to hold on to this wall, climb, shoot at the gap to make an opening, hold on to the ledge, then hoist ourselves up and morph into a ball to get through. Then we just return to a nav room, and by now I think the pattern's clear. Go to a nav room, get objective, complete objective, return to the nav room for a new objective, rinse, and repeat. Thus, we can discuss this aspect of Metroid Fusion. It is very linear. The other 2D Metroid games I played, namely Super Metroid and Samus Returns, is open-ended. You can go anywhere given that your current tools allow you to, and your objective is simple: explore and go deeper. This means you can clear a harder area first or get your butt kicked and decide to retreat. It makes for a more memorable experience. If you've ever played a Souls game, you know what this is like. In Fusion, however, your exploration is both guided and restricted. You are often told exactly where to go next, but more notable is that you're often blocked off, as we saw with these purple chevron hatches. And I can see why this would be a gripe for classic fans that were used to getting lost. And as they made progress, they probably thought, at what point will the game allow me to move around the space station freely by myself? Well, if you guessed not anytime soon, you won't be disappointed. Our next objective is to head to Sector 1, labeled SRX. We take this elevator down and this happens. Keep in mind, this was my first Metroid game, so I had no idea what that was. Upon arriving at Sector 1, we're given the map of the area. But note that this only gives the shape of the rooms. I want to mention this because we got a big improvement to the map system from Super Metroid. The map starts out great, but once you've explored the area, the rooms are colored in and the doors become mapped. And seeing as you're expected to backtrack later, this is extremely useful. Sector SRX simulates planet SR388. You know, from the second game, which looked like this. Damn, the resemblance is striking, just look at all that color. It's also labeled as the breeding environment. Remember this. Our objective is to restore the atmospheric stabilizers. The X are clogging them up for some reason. As we traverse the area, we learn a few things. Sometimes defeated X fuse together to form another enemy. Also, some regular enemies, like the Space Pirate clones, is too hardy for our current beam, so for now we use missiles to take them down. We also run into this room with lava that quickly eats away at our health. Clearly, we're not supposed to be here yet. And lastly, boss encounters are preceded by these giant eyes that block the way to the boss. They have to be destroyed in order to proceed, and conveniently they spawn red X. It's the best pickup in the game, restoring a large amount of health and ammo. On to the next boss. Finding these statues was one way Samus acquired power-ups in previous games, but we shoot it and it turns out to be X. Why was the X mimicking a power-up? Maybe we'll find out later. This one turns into a Core X boss immediately, but this one is a shielded variant that blocks even missiles. The only way to harm it is by waiting for its eye to open. Beyond that, it's a simple fight, and once we win, we get our first arm cannon upgrade, the Charge Beam. Our shots are a little wider now because we actually shoot 2 projectiles, but as the name implies, we can also hold down the fire button to charge up a shot. Return to the nav room for our new objective. I'm deliberately concealing parts of the exposition here because it'll have a more dramatic impact later. For now, we're simply told to head to the next area, Sector 2, labeled TRO, which is short for Tropical. We're there to get another upgrade. We're also told it's necessary to unlock a security level to get it. The current security level affects which doors can be opened. At level 0, we can open white hatches. We need to unlock level 1 to open blue hatches. This directly reflects our progression on the story somewhat, as there's no way to skip a security level. By the end, we'll have unlocked everything. TRO is, as the name suggests, tropical. And I guess the idea is there's a lot of plants and insects, but it's mostly just caterpillars. They don't pose much of a threat as you can imagine. Reach the data room and get another staple upgrade, the Morph Bomb. Before we discuss that though, I want you to pay close attention, because once we leave, something familiar happens. This potentially great moment is unfortunately ruined by this enemy that's right in front of us. It makes it hard to even notice something happened. The exit's been destroyed and we have to find another way out. Luckily for players, Metroid games don't try too hard to hide paths that you're supposed to go through. You can clearly see these blocks on the wall are kinda out of place. To get them out of the way, we just use the Morph Ball Bomb. And hey, one of them has a collectible, so you're rewarded more than just progress. Note that hidden rooms are painted green on the map screen. I quote hidden, but going through most of these paths are actually mandatory to finish the game. We find the next boss is this thing, and I have no idea how to describe it, but if I had to, I'd have to say it's a fusion of a jellyfish, a cyclops, and a condom, I guess. All it does is jump around, and we damage it by shooting through its mouth whenever it glides down slowly. It loses segments as we damage it, and once it runs out, it turns into Core X. Pretty much all bosses do this as a last resort, and the strategy is the same. Shoot it with enough missiles and it shatters, allowing us to absorb the X inside for a new upgrade. This time, it's a jump height increase, plus the ability to jump while in morph ball form. On the return trip, we see the caterpillars have changed state. They've gone stiff and soon enough they pupate. And it actually happens pretty quickly. We can already see the bugs inside wriggling around. Unfortunately, they can't be killed in this state and they'll haunt us later. But right now we have a more pressing encounter. That, ladies and gents, was Samus Aran at her full power, mimicked by X. Or as the game calls it, the SAX. It came about when Samus's discarded X-infected armor parts were sent to the space station, and I don't think the X could have picked a better host. The SAX is the root cause of the crisis, breaking out of the quarantine bay with ease and wreaking havoc. And at Samus's current state, she cannot fight it. You're free to try, of course, as I did. Yup, ice beams and hard-hitting missiles. 2 hits and I'm dead. The presence of the SAX in Fusion provides a sense of looming danger. It adds to the overall dread. You are for sure to be on edge in this first encounter. So this is one benefit to the linearity of Metroid Fusion. We feel the presence of a powerful enemy whenever our path is suddenly blocked by rubble like earlier. And it's not only the SAX that does it. The pupa that now riddles the sectors suddenly become platforms that we can jump on. So now the world is suddenly morphed around us and we have to adjust in turn. It definitely helps the storytelling. Remember how we upped the security level? Well, this has allowed X to spread further in the station. Our next objective is at Sector 4, AQA. Yup, it's already time for the obligatory water level. We get more monologues from Samus. She realizes the X has huge potential, but their instinct to consume makes them dangerous. Funny she should mention the potential bit. I bet she's not the only one thinking that. Our target in the aquatic sector is Ceres, a creature that moves at ultra high speed, we're told. One thing to note about the Morph Ball Bomb, it's actually a tool for finding destructible tiles. If it can be destroyed, it'll reveal what you need to do so. Thus, you'll make wide use of this when you're finding collectibles and secrets. We find out that our movement underwater is really slow. The boss of the area, Ceres, is of course mimicked by X. Its weak point is the head, and whenever we deal damage, it gains a burst of speed. And while in this state, there is no reacting to its movement, especially underwater. Just pray that you don't get hit. Or you can cheese the boss by crouching on the spot right by the entrance. Ceres can never hit us from here. Beat the boss and we get another classic upgrade, the Speed Booster. We activate it by continuously running a certain distance. Its use is quite limited because you need quite a bit of space and there can be no gaps on the floor. When activated, Samus glows and can actually hurt enemies via contact. Yet this is mostly a traversal tool. It's not a very good weapon, but the game does give us plenty of chances to try it out. To return to the nav room, we have to lower the water level. We use the speed booster to access the pump controls. And we need to speed boost again to break walls for the return trip. On the way back, you may stumble on an underwater area with a very different vibe. The enemies here are way too resilient, so clearly we're not supposed to be here yet. And the path's blocked anyway. Moving quickly to another new sector, PYR, or Pyro, which is the fire level. We already know that unlocking security levels would cause X to spread, but Samus's computer acknowledges that and allows us to do it anyway. And how about this for environmental storytelling? There are no enemies around. I only know because I got lost for around 15 minutes. It's only after we unlock security level 2 that enemies start spawning. The frequency of hidden paths is also increasing, but still it's surprisingly intuitive to figure out. This one room in particular is quite clever. When you kill the enemies, the X all gravitate towards the right side. And we also hear spawning noises, which might indicate that there's another area over there. Bomb the wall and there it is. I don't know if this was intended, but if it was, very clever. These barriers have turned blue and are now unfazed by our current weapons. Not for long though. Our goal here is to get another upgrade sent by HQ, Super Missiles. Okay game, I just got the upgrade. Can't you give me some time to relax? The impending boss music plays as we exit the room, but nothing's showing up. We find the next room is absolutely trashed, but it's not consistent with the destruction the SAX causes. Whatever it is, it's bigger. and it's right above us. We go back and... this is the security robot. Its weak point is right at its core, but it's a bit tricky to hit. Its cannon and legs block our shots. But the super missile works wonders here. If the game's to be believed, super missiles triple our damage. Plus, it's not a separate weapon with its own ammo stock like in Super Metroid. That means all our missile collectibles thus far were also super missile collectibles. Damage the robot enough and it runs away. We wouldn't have gotten an upgrade anyway because the robot isn't infected by X. Yet. We turn to the nav room and get our next objective. The next sector is labeled NOC for Nocturnal. The geometry is dank caves. Why would the space station even need this? I don't know, you tell me in the comments. We also discovered that the X are apparently destroying data rooms to prevent Samus from getting stronger. It suggests that the X have some degree of intelligence. They are now actively trying to stop Samus, a fact made even more apparent by the Cold X, blue variants that adapted freezing capabilities. These variants chase Samus, and if absorbed actually damages us. We have to avoid them for now. There's no way we can kill them, but shooting them does hold them in place for a few seconds for us to run away. Some Cold X even lie in wait inside destructible tiles. Now even your instinct to explore is being turned against you. Then we get to this room, and I gotta say this design is genius. I'll just let it play out. It is such an effective series of controlled actions. They knew the players would do exactly what I did. HQ has sent over an upgrade that'll help us fight the Cold X. Thus our objective is to get to the intact data room in this sector. Yet when we get to it, we see the X steal the upgrade. Time for a sudden boss fight. This is another Core X, but it's unique in that it's a big one. Dodging it is tricky, but it doesn't do much damage. Also, missiles don't seem to work here, so instead we use the charge beam. Defeat it and we get the Various Suit upgrade, giving us immunity to extreme temperatures and a fresh new look. We can now absorb Cold X. Of course, the X doesn't know that yet, and so at first they try to attack us. It doesn't take them long at all to learn. They'll start running away after we absorb a few Cold X. Our next objective is kinda similar to the previous. We go to the last sector we haven't explored yet to access a data room for another upgrade. Sector ARC is the ice level. I'm expecting slippery floors, but no. In fact, the whole area is just cosmetically cold. This sector was actually accessible earlier, but the cold would cause continuous damage to Samus. It's only after we get the Various Suit that we have to explore it. I feel this zone is the most tacked on in the game because functionally it's like a normal sector. Getting to the data room requires us to unlock security level 3. More areas for us to explore, but also more for the X to propagate. A necessary compromise to get the ice missiles. This is kind of a double-edged sword. We can now freeze enemies and use them as platforms, opening up puzzles like here where we need to use a pillar to activate our speed booster. But the first hit also doesn't kill if it can freeze the enemy, meaning weaker mooks that only took one missile to kill now require 2. On our way back to the main deck, we see the passing shadow of something in the background. Whatever it is huge. And then the mood suddenly changes.
Emergency in Sector 3.
The entire station is on alert and all of their paths are locked down. We have an emergency mission. The boiler in Sector 3 is malfunctioning, and we have 6 minutes to get over there and fix the problem before the space station blows up. Though this part is short, I really like this bit. I doubt this would have been possible if not for the linear nature of the game. In particular, the tension I experienced was enhanced because I wasted 2.5 minutes getting an energy tank out of the way. I had to rush to the objective, blazing through the obstacles and numerous enemies the devs put in my way to slow me down. Missile ammo be damned. There are also some puzzles. Some enemies have to be frozen at specific states so we can use them as platforms. It is not a straightforward trip. And in the end, the entity causing the boiler room to overload is a scientist mimicked by X. Now it's also apparent that they can absorb the intelligence of their victims. They deem Sam as too much of a threat to them that they're willing to die with the station just to be rid of her. There would, after all, still be X remaining in SR-388. At least we get our second beam upgrade from this encounter. The wide beam is not much more powerful from our previous beam. We just get more projectiles per shot. But its biggest benefit is that we no longer have to crouch to hit short enemies on level ground. Our next objective is a bit different. The main elevator is functional again, and so we're told to go back to the main deck to check on potential survivors. On the way, I pay a brief visit to this room. We can now check out what's inside. I have no idea what that thing is, but knowing this game, it's probably gonna be a boss. Get to the habitation deck and we find the source of the bioscience, and it's just some animals. Etacoons and Dakotas. I wouldn't know who they were if Samus doesn't explain via monologue on the way back, but it's obvious that these creatures are important to the Metroid lore. Our next objective is to return to Sector 5. We're going to reuse the data room there to download the power bomb upgrade, and from here on, finding more obscure secrets becomes a lot easier. We've actually already seen the power bomb in action when the SAX used it. It's a morph ball bomb that covers the entire screen, which also means it reveals a room full of secrets. Power bomb ammo is very limited, however, and we can only replenish it by absorbing red-colored X or in recharge rooms. We can also find collectibles to increase its capacity. We again encounter the SAX. This time there's a real risk of an exchange because it doesn't just turn around and leave. Bombing the wall uncovers a path we can open with a power bomb. Do not do this, it'll actually expose you to the SAX. Instead, you can open a path a bit higher up with normal bombs, allowing us to roll away unnoticed. Next objective, we're simply told to return to our ship for some reason. And yet it's not that simple as it turns out. The power goes out mid-elevator flight and we have to navigate the unmapped scaffolds of this space station. Again, another surprise that I don't think would have been possible in a freeform Metroid game. We emerge from the other side of the Sub-Zero containment room earlier. The frozen carcass, which turns out to be Ridley, crumbles and X emerges from it. No boss fight, but we know it's coming. We just don't know when. The power outage this time is station-wide, and it's problematic because door hatches can't be operated. It severely limits our movement around the station. Even the level 0 hatches won't budge. Return to the ship to find the animals we just freed. I hope Samus has a litter box or something in there. Anyway, our mission is to restore power to the station, and it doesn't take long before we discover the reason for the outage. The central reactor core is absolutely overrun with vegetation. We also spot familiar-looking husks. It's the pupae from the tropical sector, but the bugs are already out there somewhere. The tiles we can break are now less obvious as well, so making use of our recently acquired power bombs is crucial, and it helps that it reveals secrets and damages enemies. Now for a surprise boss fight against this spider thingy. The most dangerous spot is right between its legs. It'll grab us and it's quite annoying. Its weak spot is its mouth, shoot it whenever it opens. This is also the first boss we fight with multiple phases, outside of the core X at least. Halfway through the fight, it'll lose its legs and start jumping around. It makes a familiar sound when it bounces, giving us a hint as to what the upgrade will be. And it is an awesome upgrade, the space jump. It acts as an infinite double jump, the only requirement being we have to be somersaulting to do it. We turn on the auxiliary power, but this only reactivates save, recharge rooms, and navigation rooms. Hatches are still inoperable, so we're not done. Returning to the reactor room introduces us to these bugs. They fly and hop around, they are resilient, and they hurt like hell. Their numbers, toughness, and damage make them our bane through the next section. We find our way back to the tropical sector, and now it truly feels tropical. Roots and vines are everywhere, as well as the SAX. This time, however, a confrontation is unavoidable. We have to make a run for it. The ice missiles give us hope. It still doesn't do damage, but at least it briefly freezes the SAX. And although the Varia suit prevents us from getting frozen ourselves, the ice beam still takes off 200 health. I very nearly died. And that's not good considering that in this next section you are starved for save and recharge rooms. It's perhaps the most difficult part of the game. We eventually get to the source of the outage, a huge plant growth that we have to destroy. This boss also has two phases. At first we only have to dodge spores, but will then fire beams at us as it starts to crumble. We also don't have much room to move around due to the man-eating plants in the water. Then destroying the plant starts a barrier core X fight, and here's a tip from me. You do not have to fight it on these tight platforms. A bigger room clear of obstacles opens just to the right. And once the core shatters, we absorb the X within to get our third beam upgrade. The plasma beam pierces through enemies and is also a significant jump in firepower. And the devs let you feel its power. In the very next room are a group of bugs. The plasma beam shreds them with ease. With the veggies cleared, the power is fully back on, so we can leave this sector without passing through the scaffolds. Okay, next objective, return to Sector 5. The place practically transformed from the damage done by our next target and the most memorable boss in the game, Nightmare. We briefly passed through an underwater section where you'll no doubt discover that the space jump doesn't work. But that's about to change. And you'll probably want to save right before the Nightmare fight because it's perhaps the toughest boss in the game. Nightmare has the power to manipulate gravity, and he has two phases. During the first phase, his weakness is this thing right below him. It's a bit tricky to hit because his long arms deflect our weapons. After taking some damage, his thing turns on, increasing the room's gravity. Samus moves slower and her missiles drop to the ground like bricks even when fired upward. As we damage his, yeah, I'm just gonna call it his gravity dick. Look at how he starts crying as we bust his balls. That's cute. His cherry will eventually pop and then phase 2 starts. Nightmare takes his mask off to reveal a gruesome blob underneath. He'll then try to ram Samus with its body by flying around. It's difficult to avoid due to its huge body and its unnatural movement and speed. This time, to put it down for good, we have to shoot its face until it melts off. Like literally melt off. Our reward for this fight is the gravity suit, which gives us another cosmetic upgrade. Yet the only buff we get is we get to move normally underwater. Honestly, I wanted more, like maybe a mini gravity dick of our own. We couldn't have gotten this upgrade at a better time too, because now we have to pass through the underwater parts of Sector AQA. We also unlock security level 4 from here, opening up the host station for both us and X. We again run into these creatures that balloon up when you get close. What we're supposed to do here is get an ice missile AoE upgrade, but there's another way. First though, let's talk about missed opportunities. Samus has two inherent abilities she carried over from Super Metroid. The first is wall jumping. Somersaulting towards a wall and pressing jump in the opposite direction will propel Samus to the other direction. I demonstrate it here. It's similar to Ninja Gaiden wall jumps. The second is the Shine Spark, an airborne tackle that can only be performed after a speed boost. When Samus gets boosted, crouching will store the boost and pressing A will execute the tackle. You can control which direction the tackle goes with the D-pad. Now here's the thing. I never knew Samus could do this on my first Fusion playthrough. I saw it done in the demos in the title screen, but only after I finished the game, and even then I didn't know how to do them, because the game never teaches you. But that means these two abilities are not required to complete the game. The wall jumping is much less potent in this game compared to Super Metroid, and it becomes obsolete once we get the space jump. The usefulness of the Shine Spark is equivalent to the Speed Booster. It sees rare use as a means to damage foes. It's more for exploring and opening secrets. One such secret is the Sequence Break Easter egg. Our objective right now is to get back to the navigation room, and the intended path requires getting the last missile upgrade. Yet, players can do a difficult sequence of Shine Sparks through the underwater map and get to the nav room without the upgrade. To do this, you have to activate a speed boost through this straight section. You then have to carry the speed boost charge through several rooms, including this vertical climb. Of course, there's no way we can get through it all in just 5 seconds, so there's a way to prolong the charge. Shine Sparking towards an upward slope will resume Samus' speed boost, and crouching will store it again. We can also jump without activating the Shine Spark by doing somersaults. Finally, what makes this even more difficult is the enemies. Getting hit once takes away the stored boost. Take the boost to this room and you can tackle through this wall and make it to the nav room. Metroid Fusion, however, is not built to handle sequence breaks. Most attempts to fight bosses early will actually glitch you out of being able to complete the game. This sequence break, however, was foreseen by the developers. The computer commends your ingenuity and skill, and a Federation guide jumps in as well. There's even a fourth wall break, as the computer wonders how many players can actually see this message. But alas, the exit's blocked, so you're still forced to go through the intended way. We find a hidden data room and get a surprise upgrade, the diffusion missiles. And this one's just weird. To use it, we hold down R to charge up a missile shot. On impact, it spreads an ice blast that freezes enemies in a wide area. Its primary use is to freeze these puffballs that block our path. As for its combat viability, I didn't have much use for it. The ice blast spreads out too slowly and the charging is also slow. I don't even think the charged missile shot does any additional damage too. So this is just another upgrade for exploration. Back at the nav room, the computer tells us off for unlocking security level 4 without its authorization, and apparently the diffusion missile upgrade was unintentional. Okay, that was kinda sus. And now back to the nocturnal sector. Our objective is to finish off the security robot from earlier. It's now been infected by X due to the damage we caused it, and it's acting very strange for some reason. We're also told to leave the sector immediately once we defeat it, as we're being tracked by the SAX. As we're about to find out, this was probably a lie. We find this one-way door. It apparently leads to a restricted area, made clear by the voice alert when we approach.
Warning, no entry without authorization.
This prompts the appearance of the robot. Fighting it on foot is dangerous because of the electrified water. You can let out a power bomb to reveal a row of handles from the ceiling that we can hang from, much like in the previous fight. This time though, the security robot's hops can reach and damage us while hanging. Other than that, the same strategy applies. It has the same weakness, its glowing core. And our reward is another beam upgrade, the wave beam. Our beams can now pass through enemies and walls. This means one-way doors are no longer an issue. And of course we're going in the restricted area, because 1, it's right there, and 2, you told me it's a restricted area. I gotta go in. I can't help it. All hatches in here are red, giving a real sense of this area is forbidden. Here we see something that should no longer exist. Metroids inside breeding tanks. And guess who shows up? That's right, the SAX. But it's so preoccupied with destroying its natural predator, it doesn't even notice us. It blows up the isolation tanks and we escape before it detaches from the space station. But that means the SAX is no more, right? Well, if you really think about it, then of course not. The X can multiply and make more copies. We're told there's at least 10 in the space station. And now for another series first. At least I think so. Samus has actual dialogue. The computer also exposes the peaceful purpose of the Metroid breeding tanks. Yeah right, we've heard that before. With the X out of control, she's simply told to leave the space station, so off we go. On our way out, we run into these golden space pirates. They are immune to everything we throw at them. Their only weakness is charge beams from behind. We only see them here, but I want you to remember them for now. Surprise boss fight. We knew this was coming and now it's time. It's an X copy of Metroid antagonist Ridley. You might want to cover your ears during this fight. Its scream pierces the very soul. I don't really have a strategy for this fight. I just kept firing at it with missiles until it spontaneously combusted, and I just tank all the hits that I'm getting. Upon its defeat, we get perhaps the most powerful upgrade in the game. Our somersault jumps have been transformed into the screw attack. Not only does it cause damage to anything we roll into, Samus is invulnerable the entire time. And if you're curious about the damage, then behold. We are nigh unstoppable with this. But we did have a pseudo screw attack prior to this. We do it by somersaulting into enemies while our beam is fully charged. It's riskier though, because if the enemy doesn't die from it, we take damage. And it's only as powerful as our current beam. Still, it's quite useful for rolling through weaker enemies. Our exit route finds us going through Sector SRX again, where we see these empty Metroid husks. Breeding environment indeed. The true purpose of this zone is to facilitate the growth of new Metroids. It also might be why the X did what they did near the start of the game. It's time for the final stretch. Samus will not allow the X to be captured by the Federation. After all, they already tried to breed Metroids. She plans to initiate the self-destruct sequence. The computer, aligned with the wishes of the Federation, is of course against this, so it locks us inside the nav room. Then we find out that the computer is actually a simulation of Adam, Samus's former commanding officer that she monologued about earlier. It suddenly has a change of heart and assists Samus in eradicating the X. Not only will we destroy the space station, we're going to send it to SR-388 to destroy the planet itself. I think it's all a bit excessive and overdramatic. The computer's face turn is also pretty strange, but by this point I'm just going along. The narrative and lore may be strong in this game, but the story itself isn't very compelling. Just as we're about to get to the operations room, we encounter the SAX, or just one of them anyway. Luckily, we can now fight back. A fully charged wave beam is powerful enough to cause damage to it. Its ice beam still smarts though, still taking off 2 energy tanks per shot. The screw attack is also out. It'll just meet us mid-air with its own screw attack. Damage it up and it starts losing form, eventually transforming into a monstrous amalgamation of its mimics. Yet this form is actually a simple and quick fight. It only hops around and goes down in just 4 charge shots. As we're about to absorb the X blob, it runs away. Well, that's new. Whatever, the game's almost over anyway. Change the station's orbit and the 3-minute timer starts. We can no longer save from this point on. Run back to the docking bay where our ship is and... I don't think that's our ship. I don't think that's our ship either. So, in a strange twist, the final boss is not a form of X. It's actually an Omega Metroid. In fact, it's X that actually helps us survive. Our current form is powerless against it. But just as we're about to be defeated, the X blob arrives, turns back into Samus, and fights its mortal enemy. It gets shredded by a single swipe, and now we can absorb the final upgrade, the dreaded Ice Beam. The final boss is disappointingly simple. It only has this swipe attack that knocks us back, and all we have to do is hit its chest with ice beams until it dies. No other stage, it's just done. The ship returns and picks us up, kicking off the ending. Turns out it was the animals that was piloting it. Wouldn't you know it, Samus saved the animals in Super Metroid. Canonically at least, and now they've saved us in turn. The space station falls onto SR-388, and the X are no more. Samus disobeyed the Federation's wishes and may have been branded a traitor, but hey, that's another story. For now, that, ladies and gentlemen, was Metroid Fusion. I don't have many negative things to say about this game. I say its flaws are made apparent only if it's compared to other Metroid games. Perhaps I was lucky that I came into it not expecting much, and in turn I was mighty impressed by how much of a good time it actually gave me. Heck, even in comparison to other Metroid games, I don't think Fusion is a bad entry. It's different, to be sure, but the changes they made also allowed for a very unique experience. In particular, the world was allowed to change shape around Samus. I feel like it enhances the sense of dread in this game. My only main gripes are the underwhelming finale. I really think they could have orchestrated a better final boss fight. I also have to mention its length. Although this is not my first playthrough and I focused on getting through the story, 4 hours is still really short. And that's doubly bad because there's also no replay value to speak of. You can perhaps replay the game to get a better time and collectible completion, but that only changes the ending screen you get. You can also continue your completed save, and it's only here that the entire space station is free to explore, allowing you to collect everything for that 100%. Was it worth the wait? You tell me. Other than that, Metroid Fusion is solid. The controls are so crisp, moving around and shooting stuff feels really good and snappy. The graphics, which I may have neglected to talk about, is a masterwork of eye-popping sprites. And the atmosphere is top-notch. Horror and dread is quite a difficult thing to do for 2D games, but somehow Metroid just knows how to do it. It may not be the best Metroid game, but I think it's among the best in the series and the Game Boy Advance overall. You've made it this far and I thank you. Why not like and subscribe to show your support? I hope you have a lovely day. See you next video.